Greetings, respected viewers. In this video, I'm continuing my series on the history of the Northern Ireland Troubles. So, picking up where I left off in 1972, just after 14 people were shot dead by the British Army in Derry, an incident known as Bloody Sunday. The IRA decided to step up its bombing campaign. They wanted to wreck the economy of Northern Ireland, make it more expensive for Great Britain to subsidise Northern Ireland, figuring that would sap the will of the British public to do so, and Great Britain would eventually run up the white flag, say, all right, you've made Northern Ireland such a problem, we don't want it, we're expelling it from the UK, it must join the Republic of Ireland. By the way, the IRA wanted a two-stage process. First of all, to take Northern Ireland into the Republic, but also a revolution in the Republic to make it a socialist state, get rid of pro-British elements, as they called anyone who wasn't behind their cause. A few days after Bloody Sunday, the IRA set off a bomb in a village called Claudy, County Londonderry, and they killed 9 people. No one's ever caught for that. The RUC was aware of a rumour that a Catholic priest had planted the bomb. The man was identified, his bishop put it to him, and this clergyman strenuously denied that he had anything to do with it. He'd sometimes collected money for prisoners' families. Was that going to the IRA? His name is known. He died of natural causes about 10 years later. The RUC considered arresting this man, but coming hard on the heels of Bloody Sunday, it was felt it would inflame Catholic opinion. This was an era in which Catholic priests were not arrested in Ireland, north or south. All the paedophile scandals were swept under the carpet because the priests were the Lord's anointed. They were just exalted. It was almost as though they were immune to arrest. Legally they weren't, but in effect they were. Sean O'Callaghan, an IRA man, later told how he and his IRA comrades were sheltered in a priest's house. In the 50s, a bomb had been hidden in the Catholic Cathedral in Armagh, not to blow up the cathedral, but for use elsewhere, though the RUC had found it, which is not to suggest that most Catholic priests were doing this sort of thing. And the Catholic hierarchy spoke out against the IRA. But when Paisley said, the priests are behind the IRA, he wasn't entirely wrong. He was exaggerating a lot. Most priests were not, but a few were actively helping the IRA. Anyway, Bloody Friday, 1972, 22 bombs went off in Belfast's central shopping district within an hour, and 9 people were killed. The IRA had phoned in warnings before the bombs went off, 30 minutes each, but so many warnings, so confused that the RUC couldn't possibly evacuate everyone. So it was clearly an attempt to kill civilians. If they wanted simply to damage property, they could have set them off in the middle of the night when nobody was around. Now, Brendan Hughes, an IRA man, the Dark, he said, the British government deliberately allowed the bombs to kill civilians. They wanted it this way because that besmirched the IRA. Well, who planted the bombs in the first place? So the IRA began setting off bombs in England, specifically only England, not Wales, not Scotland, again, to damage the economy. Now, Sean McStearfan was Chief of Staff of the IRA. His real name was John Stevens. He was born in England, he had some Irish ancestry, been in the RAF regiment, and later got into the Irish Republican cause. He believed the IRA needed to kill 65 British soldiers, then Northern Ireland would be kicked out of the UK. He was looking to South Arabia, we now call it Yemen, part of Yemen anyway. 65 soldiers had been killed there in the 60s, and the UK had withdrawn, which was obviously completely naive of McStearfan, thinking that Northern Ireland was a colony when it was an integral part of the UK. The Yemeni people were never called British, they were not represented in Parliament, anything like that, so the comparison was utterly bogus. It showed they really had no historical perspective. The UK's policy in the 60s had to be to withdraw from Yemen, and they said they'd do it within 6 years. They did it after 5 years, 6 months. It wasn't comparing like with like. The loyalist terrorists stepped up their bestial attacks on Catholic civilians, which of course enraged the Catholic community, and the Crown forces were not very effective in protecting the Catholic community. And some Catholics, whatever their doubts about the IRA, would say they're the only thing standing in between us and the UVF. Let me see. Then June 1972, there was a truce between Her Majesty's government and the IRA. This was astonishing. 3 years earlier, Harold Wilson had said the border's not an issue, and now some IRA representatives were invited to London. They were met and they're flown by helicopter to London. Gerry Adams, Martin McGuinness, Ivor Bell. They circled around Belfast a bit, and the IRA men were slightly worried their own side would shoot down the helicopter by accident, which shows they obviously didn't trust their people to keep to the truce. So there was a secret meeting at Cheyne Walk. It wasn't announced to the British public that the meeting was taking place. Cheyne Walk was the home of the multimillionaire Conservative MP Henry Channon, son of the famous diarist Chips Channon. And a British government minister later said, well, we did this to find out what they wanted, which was an absurd thing to say, because the IRA announced it every day. They wanted Northern Ireland to be out of the UK, join the Republic of Ireland, and that's that, and a socialist state. Were these negotiations remotely serious from the British government side? I'm not sure they were, because the IRA said complete withdrawal by 1st of January next year, and there was no way the UK government was going to agree to that. Did it just allow the British government to get spies into the IRA? There were some no-go zones at that time around the Falls and the Bogside of Derry. Now, Loyalists were very troubled by these negotiations. They felt it could only end to their disadvantage. The UK government was parleying with the IRA, we're going to make some concessions, and they did not want that. Earlier that year, Harold Wilson, leader of the opposition, had been to Dublin for secret talks with the IRA. Heath, a Conservative, was Prime Minister at the time. So it seemed to be a zero-sum game. Either Republicans could gain or Loyalists could gain. It was more like Loyalists could keep the status quo. That was about the best that was on offer for them. So the Loyalist terrorists were very eager to provoke the IRA into resuming violence, because Loyalists wanted to scupper the negotiations. So again, they carried on killing Catholic civilians because they thought then the IRA would hit back at the Crown forces, and the UK government would not cut a deal under those circumstances. Anyway, in 1972, Wilson said there ought to be United Ireland within 15 years. So that was by 1987. Here we are over 30 years on after its deadline, and it's nowhere near occurring. So the proximate cause of the breakdown of the ceasefire was a dispute over housing, over Catholics trying to move into houses vacated by Protestants in a Catholic area, and so on. Anyway, by July 1972, the ceasefire was over, and there was a massive upsurge in violence. So there were bombings almost daily, people being shot dead daily. People became to be inured to violence. It was almost normalised. This is when Operation Motorman began. For 3 years, certain working class Catholic areas in Belfast and Derry had not been entered by the security forces. So thousands more soldiers have been brought to Northern Ireland, and various JCBs and so on, to clear away the barricades. Bear in mind, in these proletarian areas, very few people had a car. That was a barricade you couldn't drive in, you had to walk in, and there'd be some men stopping you, asking who you were, patting you down if you went into this area. So the British Army patrolled these streets 24/7 in bricks, teams of 4 men. So although there was a security force present on the street, the IRA controlled it still in a more subtle sense. So the IRA almost had a state within a state, and said the RUC are just here to help an army of occupation. They're not to deal with ordinary policing issues. If someone commits a crime against you, you come to us. The IRA, we are the police, not the RUC. We'll identify suspects, we'll beat them into a confession, and our punishment will be beating them with iron bars, breaking limbs, possibly shooting out their kneecaps, things like that. Sometimes exile, giving people 24 hours to leave Ireland or be shot dead, and exile them for 5 years, 10 years, life, whatever it was. So that was the IRA's very rough justice. Obviously, they didn't have fair trials, defence lawyers, didn't go in for fingerprint evidence or anything like that. The Loyalist terrorists did the same to a lesser extent, because they were not outright hostile to the RUC, even though the RUC was arresting them and jailing them for sectarian murders too. In Omagh, County Tyrone, Inspector Peter Flanagan was shot dead. He was an RUC officer, a Catholic and an interrogator. Remember, I said some of the interrogators at the key interrogation centres could only be Catholics, precisely so Republican propagandists couldn't claim this was sectarian violence. Anyway, that was Sean O'Callaghan, who, according to himself, shot dead this man. So by the end of 1972, 500 people had been killed. It was the bloodiest year of the Troubles. 100 British soldiers had been killed. So for the IRA, this is a fair degree of success. So the IRA were upbeat. they felt the UK was close to breaking point and they may well achieve their goals because the British public would be revolted by the level of violence and throw in the towel.